The alien queen sat in her grand throne room, her eyes fixed on the holoscreen in front of her. Across the galaxy, she had conquered countless worlds, brought entire species to their knees, and shown no mercy to those who dared oppose her rule. Yet there was one thing that always made her scoff: stories about human warriors. She had heard them many times, tales of Earth's soldiers, fierce and brave, fighting against impossible odds. Some said humans were capable of amazing feats, that their warriors could defeat the strongest of enemies, even the fiercest aliens. The Queen, however, dismissed them as nothing more than myths, stories to keep the common folk entertained. There was no truth to them, no evidence, just imagination. She was the most powerful being in the galaxy. No human could ever challenge her or her empire. And so, with a laugh, she often joked to her advisors about these so-called human warriors. They say humans are fierce fighters, as if they could possibly stand up to an alien army. Ridiculous, the Queen would say, waving her hand dismissively. We've crushed entire fleets without breaking a sweat. What's a human to us? Her advisors, many of whom were more cautious and thoughtful, would exchange glances but say nothing. It was clear that, in the Queen's mind, Earth's warriors were nothing more than a fable, no more real than the dragons of old. But one day, an unexpected visitor arrived from Earth, a diplomatic envoy sent by the humans. They came in peace, or so it seemed. They carried with them a simple message: we wish to form an alliance. The Queen, always looking for new ways to strengthen her empire, agreed to meet with the humans. After all, if they were as weak as she believed, it would be an easy negotiation. The human ambassador, a calm and composed man named Michael, began speaking of the potential benefits of an alliance. His words were respectful, but as he spoke, there was a glimmer of something in his eyes, something that caught the Queen's attention. "Your Majesty," the ambassador said, his voice steady, "we may be different, but we share the same goal: survival. Our warriors are ready to fight, and we believe that with your strength and our courage, we can accomplish great things together." The Queen raised an eyebrow, amused by the human's boldness. "Warriors, courage." She chuckled softly. "Do not speak to me of courage, human. You have been fed too many fables. I have heard of your so-called warriors, and I dismiss them. There is nothing special about your kind. You are no match for us." The ambassador stood tall, undeterred by her words. He didn't argue, but there was something about him that made the Queen pause. She realized something. Perhaps the human didn't fully understand the consequences of his words. It was time to show him just how ridiculous his beliefs were. With a sly smile, she made a decision. "If you truly believe in these fables of yours, send me one of your warriors. Let me see for myself if there is any truth to your claims. Only then will we consider your proposal." The ambassador looked uncertain for a moment, but then nodded slowly. "Very well, Your Majesty. I will send you the strongest of us." The Queen's lips curled into a smile, confident that this would be nothing more than a small diversion. She was about to show the humans the truth. They were just a legend, no match for the might of her empire. The alien Queen sat back in her throne, her eyes gleaming with amusement as the human ambassador left the room. She had made her point clear. No human could ever stand against her empire, not even their so-called strongest warrior. The Queen's thoughts were already turning to other matters, confident that the whole situation would be a fleeting curiosity. But the human's words, "We believe our warriors are worth your time," echoed in her mind, making her even more certain of her superiority. Weeks passed, and the Queen focused on the usual affairs of her empire, but her thoughts would often wander back to the upcoming challenge. The human ambassador's words, though polite, had left a strange impression on her. Still, the Queen couldn't shake the thought that this was nothing more than a test of her patience, a foolish display that would soon end with the human in defeat. The day of the challenge finally arrived. The Queen ordered the grand arena to be prepared, a massive structure built for combat that stretched far and wide, surrounded by a crowd of her loyal soldiers and the highest-ranking officers of her empire. She smiled as the arena filled with alien warriors, eager for the show. They were all eager to see this so-called human warrior meet his fate. As the sun began to set, casting a dramatic shadow over the arena, the human envoy returned. But this time, he was not alone. Behind him walked a tall, muscular figure, a human warrior named Riker, chosen to represent Earth. His expression was calm but focused, his movements precise, as if he had already prepared for battle. Riker was dressed in simple combat gear, not unlike the armor worn by the Queen's soldiers, though it was clear he didn't rely on heavy weaponry. His gaze remained steady, scanning the crowd as he made his way to the center of the arena. To the Queen's surprise, Riker didn't seem afraid. There was no hint of hesitation or doubt in his step. It was as if he was already prepared for whatever was about to come. The Queen narrowed her eyes, intrigued by his calm demeanor. She had expected the human to be nervous, perhaps even trembling at the thought of facing her warriors. But instead, Riker's confidence only seemed to heighten her curiosity. With a loud voice, the Queen called for silence. The crowd hushed immediately, and the tension in the air was thick. She looked down at Riker, standing in the center of the arena, awaiting her orders. "You stand before me, human," the Queen began, her voice cold and commanding. "Do you truly believe your kind can defeat us? What makes you think you are worthy of even being here?" Riker didn't flinch. He raised his head, his voice steady as he responded. "I'm here because I believe in the strength of humanity, and I believe in the power of belief itself. You've heard the stories. Now, you'll see for yourself." The Queen's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unfamiliar crossing her face. She couldn't tell if it was arrogance or genuine confidence that spoke through Riker's words. Regardless, it only made her more determined to prove him wrong. She raised a hand, signaling the beginning of the challenge. The Queen's voice echoed through the arena as she gave the signal, and the alien warriors began to move into position. The first wave of soldiers approached Riker, each of them armed with weapons far more advanced than any that humans could wield. The Queen watched closely, her eyes sharp and calculating. The battle was about to begin, and she was eager to witness how long this so-called human warrior would last. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the grand arena. The first wave of alien warriors, all highly trained and armed to the teeth, stood at the ready. Each one wore advanced armor that shimmered in the light, their weapons, energy blades, plasma guns, and shock staffs, designed to overpower any opponent. The Queen's gaze swept across the battleground as she sat in her throne, an expression of amusement on her face. She was certain that these humans, no matter how brave, stood no chance against her finest soldiers. Meanwhile, Riker stood alone in the center of the arena. His calm demeanor remained unbroken despite the chaos of alien warriors surrounding him. He wasn't wearing the heavy armor of the aliens, nor did he carry any futuristic weapons. Instead, he wore simple, practical combat gear, lightweight and designed for speed and agility. He didn't need advanced technology to prove his worth. What he carried was something far more valuable: his human ingenuity and his experience from countless battles. Riker closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the task ahead. He knew the odds were stacked against him. He had read the reports of the Queen's army. Her warriors were some of the most feared in the galaxy. But Riker had faced enemies who were bigger, stronger, and faster than any alien in this arena. What set him apart from them was his ability to think on his feet, to adapt in the heat of battle, and to use his environment to his advantage. He tightened his grip on the short blade in his hand. It was simple compared to the alien weaponry, but it was sharp and reliable. The Queen may have thought this was a test of strength, but for Riker, it was a test of survival. The air was thick with tension. The alien warriors moved into formation, slowly closing in on him from all sides. Riker knew the time for thinking was over. It was time for action. His heart beat steadily, his mind sharp and focused. He glanced around, taking note of his surroundings. The arena wasn't just a battlefield, it was an opportunity. The high walls, the pillars scattered throughout, and even the platforms above all held potential. Riker could use them to his advantage. The first warrior lunged at him, a massive alien with sharp claws and heavy armor. Riker sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the creature's swipe. He ducked under the warrior's arm and rolled behind him. With quick precision, Riker struck, landing a blow that disabled the alien's weapon, causing it to malfunction. The warrior staggered back in surprise, giving Riker just enough time to finish the job. The crowd gasped, shocked by the speed and efficiency of the human's movements. The Queen narrowed her eyes in surprise. She had expected Riker to falter, to show fear. But instead, he was proving to be more capable than she had imagined. Another warrior charged at him, this one armed with an energy spear. Riker didn't hesitate. He ducked low and used the warrior's momentum against him, sweeping the alien's legs out from under him. The warrior fell hard to the ground, momentarily stunned. Riker took advantage of the opportunity, disarming him with a quick, clean move. The Queen watched in silence as her warriors fell one by one. She could feel the shift in the air, the growing sense of disbelief among her soldiers. They had underestimated the human, and now he was proving to be a force to be reckoned with. Riker stood tall in the center of the arena, his face set in determination. He wasn't done yet, but the message had been sent. He wasn't here to be a fable. He was here to show the Queen and her empire what humanity was truly capable of. The arena had fallen silent. The cheers and jeers from the alien crowd had dulled into a hushed murmur. Riker stood in the center, his chest rising and falling with each controlled breath. His blade was still in hand, but his eyes scanned the arena, alert for any new threats. He had already disabled 3 of the Queen's best warriors, but there were more to come. He knew the worst was yet to arrive. Above him, the alien Queen's eyes narrowed, watching him closely. The amusement from earlier had faded, replaced by something more intense, curiosity. She had expected to see the human crumble under the pressure, perhaps even beg for mercy. Instead, she saw a warrior who was calm, efficient, and deadly in a way she had never anticipated. She leaned forward in her throne, her gaze fixed on Riker. Her soldiers were regrouping, ready to send in the next wave, but something about this human was different. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid. And that, perhaps more than anything, unnerved her. A new group of alien warriors, more heavily armored than the ones before, stepped forward. Their faces were covered by helmets, their bodies cloaked in battle gear that gleamed in the dim light of the arena. They carried plasma rifles, energy shields, and other advanced weaponry, tools that would easily overwhelm any normal soldier. But the Queen's eyes lingered on Riker. Would he still be able to keep up? The first alien warrior raised his rifle and fired. The bolt of energy screamed toward Riker, but he was already moving. He dropped to the ground, rolling to the side with surprising agility. The energy bolt struck the ground where he had just stood, leaving a scorch mark in the sand. Riker didn't stop. He was already up and on his feet, his blade flashing in the light as he deflected another shot with a swift movement. The alien soldiers advanced, their rifles aimed directly at him. But Riker was faster. He darted between them, using the pillars in the arena to block incoming fire and stay out of the line of sight. His every move was calculated, precise, as he made his way to the nearest warrior. In one fluid motion, Riker lunged forward, taking the alien by surprise. He disarmed the soldier in a flash, twisting the rifle from his grip and throwing it aside. Before the warrior could react, Riker's blade was at his throat, and the alien fell to the ground with a grunt. The Queen's expression darkened. Her warriors were falling faster than she had expected, and Riker wasn't even breaking a sweat. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the battle shifting. Her warriors, who had once been so confident, were now hesitant. Was the human really this strong, or was there something else at play here? The next wave of warriors moved in, this time working in pairs, hoping to outsmart the human. But Riker anticipated their movements. He blocked an incoming strike from one, then used the other warrior's momentum against him, tossing him aside effortlessly. With each move, he seemed to predict their next attack, countering it with ease. It was almost as if he had fought in battles just like this his entire life. The queen's grip on her throne tightened. She had never seen anything like this before. The human warrior was no longer just a fable in her mind. He was a living, breathing force. The realization hit her like a jolt of electricity. She had underestimated humanity, and now she would have to face the consequences of her mistake. Riker stood tall, his breathing steady. He was far from finished, but with each warrior he took down, he sent a message to the Queen, and to everyone watching, that humanity was not a fable. It was a force to be reckoned with. The arena had become a battlefield of its own. Riker stood alone, facing a sea of alien warriors who had quickly learned that underestimating the human was a mistake. The Queen watched from her throne, her eyes never leaving the fighter in the center. Her initial amusement had long since faded, replaced by a growing sense of awe. And something else. Fear. Riker wasn't just fighting to survive. He was proving a point. His movements were fast, fluid, and precise. He had already disabled several of the Queen's soldiers, and now the next wave of warriors was closing in on him. They had learned from their mistakes and were no longer rushing in blindly. Instead, they formed a circle, surrounding him from all angles, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But Riker wasn't intimidated. His mind raced as he analyzed the situation. He had fought in worse conditions, with fewer options, and he knew that every move counted. His blade was still in his hand, ready to defend himself, but his eyes constantly scanned for weaknesses. Every soldier, no matter how advanced, had a blind spot. The first warrior lunged at him, a swift and powerful strike aimed directly at his chest. Riker ducked under the blow and used the momentum to spin behind his opponent. With a quick twist of his wrist, he disarmed the alien, sending the weapon flying across the arena. Before the warrior could recover, Riker delivered a solid kick to his side, sending him sprawling to the ground. The crowd gasped. Riker wasn't just surviving, he was dominating. But there was no time to celebrate. Another warrior charged at him, this one faster and more skilled than the others. He wielded an energy blade, its edges glowing with deadly power. The two clashed in a flurry of strikes, each one faster than the last. Riker parried the first few blows, but the alien's strength was evident, and Riker could feel his arms growing tired. This was the challenge he had been waiting for, the fight that would truly test his limits. He stepped back, narrowly avoiding a deep cut from the energy blade, and then countered with a swift jab. The blade didn't cut through the alien's armor, but the force of the blow made the warrior stagger back. Riker seized the opportunity, using his opponent's moment of weakness to land a heavy punch to his face. The alien dropped to the ground, unconscious. The Queen's eyes widened. This human was a force to be reckoned with. She had expected him to falter, but instead, he was holding his own. No, more than that. He was winning. The warriors she had so carefully selected were falling one by one. She had never seen anything like this before. Riker stood tall, wiping the sweat from his brow. His chest rose and fell with each breath, but his mind remained clear. He knew there were more to come, and the Queen was watching every move. But he wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for humanity, proving that Earth's warriors were not to be dismissed as fables. The next warrior was already charging at him. This time, it was a 2-on-1 fight. Two alien soldiers moved together in perfect coordination, their weapons poised to strike. Riker didn't hesitate. He ducked low, narrowly avoiding the first strike, and then used his agility to slip behind them. In one fluid motion, he disabled both their weapons, knocking them out of their hands and taking them down with a series of quick strikes. It was over almost as soon as it had begun. The Queen clenched her fists in frustration. Her warriors had been defeated by this human. It was clear now that Riker wasn't just a symbol of Earth's strength. He was the embodiment of everything she had overlooked. Riker stood victorious in the center of the arena, bloody but unbowed. He had sent a message to the Queen, and to the entire galaxy. Humanity was no mere fable. The atmosphere in the arena had shifted. What started as an exhibition of power and dominance from the Queen's forces had turned into something entirely unexpected. Riker, the human warrior, stood at the center, his face grim but focused, surrounded by fallen alien soldiers. His breathing was steady, but there was a spark in his eyes, a spark that sent a wave of uncertainty through the Queen. She sat in her throne, her usual confidence shaken. For the first time, she couldn't dismiss the human warrior as just another soldier. Riker had fought with a skill and precision that even her elite warriors could not match. He wasn't just physically strong. His mind, his strategies, and his adaptability were unlike anything she had ever seen. He was not a fable, and the realization gnawed at her. Her fingers tightened around the armrests of her throne as she watched Riker stand tall, victorious over another wave of soldiers. He hadn't faltered once. Each move was deliberate, calculated, and effective. His endurance seemed endless, his will unshaken. The Queen had seen warriors fall to less challenging foes, but this human, this Riker, was relentless. Impossible, she muttered under her breath, barely audible over the hushed murmurs of the alien crowd. No human could fight like this. The Queen glanced around at her remaining warriors. They looked uneasy, some even hesitant, and that was a sight she had never expected to witness. Her soldiers, who had never known fear, now seemed unsure. The stories she had dismissed as fables were beginning to feel too real. She had thought herself above such myths, but now, as Riker continued to prove his might, she felt doubt creep into her mind. For a moment, she considered calling an end to the challenge. She could declare Riker the victor, grant the humans their alliance, and avoid any more embarrassment. But that wasn't the Queen's way. She never backed down from a challenge. She never admitted defeat. "No," she whispered, almost to herself. "I will not let him win so easily. I must show him that no human can defeat me or my empire." She rose from her throne and signaled to her generals. Her voice was cold, commanding, as she issued her next order. "Send in the final wave. If one human warrior can defeat my best soldiers, he will face me." The generals hesitated for a brief moment, then nodded, already moving to carry out her command. A new group of alien soldiers, even more formidable than the last, marched into the arena. This time, they were armed with advanced weapons capable of disabling even the toughest of opponents. They had been trained for this moment, trained to hunt and destroy. Riker, standing still in the center of the arena, wiped the sweat from his brow, preparing for the next wave. His body ached from the previous battles, but his mind remained sharp. He could sense the change in the air, the subtle shift in the Queen's approach. He wasn't naive. He knew the worst was yet to come. As the new warriors closed in, Riker took a deep breath. He wasn't afraid. He had come too far to back down now. Each challenge he faced was a step toward proving that humanity wasn't just a legend, but a force to be reckoned with. The Queen watched closely from her throne. She couldn't deny it anymore. This human warrior had earned her respect. And yet, she refused to let it end like this. She would show him the power of her empire. She would remind him that no matter how skilled, no matter how determined, a human was nothing compared to an alien queen. The air in the arena was thick with tension. Riker, battered and bruised from the previous waves of combat, stood his ground, watching as the final wave of the Queen's warriors advanced toward him. Each soldier was stronger, more advanced, and better equipped than the last. Their armor gleamed in the dim light, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. The Queen had pulled out all the stops. This would be his hardest fight yet. Riker's muscles ached, but his mind was still clear. He had fought through the pain before, and this time would be no different. He adjusted his grip on his blade, taking a deep breath, and focused on the approaching soldiers. His body was tired, but his resolve was stronger than ever. The first warrior to approach was massive, nearly twice Riker's size, with thick armor that seemed impenetrable. He swung a giant hammer with such force that it could level a building. The air whistled as the hammer came down toward Riker's head, but he was already moving. With a swift roll to the side, Riker avoided the strike and leaped to his feet, using the warrior's own momentum against him. As the alien swung again, Riker ducked under the blow, landing a quick strike to the soldier's exposed side. The blow didn't penetrate the armor, but it was enough to throw the warrior off balance. Riker followed up with a fast series of jabs, aiming for weak points in the alien's armor. But the warrior was relentless, swinging the massive hammer with more fury than ever. Riker needed to end this quickly. He darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the hammer's crushing blow, and used the alien's moment of overextension to his advantage. In one fluid motion, he kicked the warrior's legs out from under him, sending the giant crashing to the ground. The Queen, watching from her throne, clenched her fists. She had underestimated him before, but now, watching him dispatch her strongest warriors with such ease, she felt the true weight of her mistake. She had assumed humans were weak, that their stories were only legends, but Riker was making her question everything she thought she knew. Each move he made proved that the human warrior was something beyond ordinary, a force of nature she couldn't control. Riker, still panting from the effort, prepared for the next wave. He wasn't done yet, but his energy was fading. The Queen's warriors were relentless, and he was reaching the limits of his endurance. His movements slowed for just a moment, enough for the next soldier to take a swing. This one was fast, an alien with sleek aerodynamic armor and jewel blades that moved like lightning. The blades clashed with Riker's own sword, sparks flying as metal scraped against metal. The two warriors moved in a deadly dance, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Riker was fast, but the alien was even faster. He had to think quickly. His strength alone wouldn't be enough to win this fight. As the alien lunged forward, Riker ducked low, using the alien's momentum to flip him over his shoulder. The warrior crashed hard onto the arena floor, temporarily stunned. But Riker didn't wait. He quickly disarmed the alien, tossing the blades aside, and with a precise strike, knocked the warrior unconscious. The crowd roared with shock and admiration. Riker had taken down another one of the Queen's finest, but he was far from finished. The Queen's eyes were locked on Riker. For the first time, she felt a sense of respect for him. He was more than a warrior. He was a symbol of something much bigger. He was showing her that humanity was more than just a story. It was real, and it was stronger than she had ever imagined. Riker stood in the center of the arena, his sword raised high. His body was battered, but his spirit remained unbroken. The Queen had sent her best soldiers, and yet he had stood tall against them all. The message had been sent. Humanity was no longer just a myth. The arena had fallen into an eerie silence. Riker, bloody but unbroken, stood in the center. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination. The alien warriors who had once been confident in their abilities now lay scattered around him, defeated one by one. The Queen's finest soldiers had been no match for him. Yet he knew the final challenge was coming. The Queen had promised it, and he could feel it in the air. The Queen sat high in her throne, her eyes narrowed with a mixture of admiration and something else, something darker. She had never imagined a human could be so strong, so relentless. Riker had proved himself in every way. His courage, his skill, his intelligence, he had exceeded all expectations. But she was not ready to accept defeat. She would not let this human warrior walk away victorious without facing her directly. With a sharp movement, she stood, her cloak flowing behind her as she descended from her throne. Her guards cleared the way, and all eyes in the arena were on her. Riker turned to face her, his sword still gripped tightly in his hand. But he didn't raise it. He knew the Queen was a warrior in her own right, and this final test was inevitable. The Queen approached Riker slowly, her gaze piercing. "You've proven your strength, human," she said, her voice cold but respectful. "But now you will face me. I am the ruler of this empire, and no one, no matter how strong, will challenge my authority without paying the price." Riker didn't speak. He was tired, his body aching from the long battle, but his resolve had never been stronger. The Queen was not just a ruler, she was a fighter. He knew this would be his toughest challenge yet, but he was ready. The Queen raised her hands, and a weapon materialized in the air, a long, curved blade of energy, shimmering with power. It was unlike anything Riker had seen before. He knew this was not just a physical battle. This was a test of everything he had learned throughout the challenge: his speed, his mind, and his ability to adapt. With a swift motion, the Queen lunged at him. Her blade moved like lightning, each strike faster than anything Riker had faced. He barely had time to react, but his instincts kicked in. He blocked the first strike, the energy blade clashing with his own sword, sending sparks flying. The force behind the blow pushed him back, but he steadied himself and quickly countered, aiming for the Queen's side. She parried effortlessly, her movements graceful and fluid, like she had been trained for this moment her entire life. The fight continued, each blow exchanged with incredible speed and power. Riker was holding his own, but he could feel his energy draining. The Queen was relentless, and every strike she made pushed him closer to his limit. But Riker wasn't backing down. He refused to give up. As they continued to clash, the Queen's face remained unreadable. She had expected to overwhelm him, but instead she found herself struggling to land a decisive blow. Riker's skill, his determination, and his will to survive had thrown her off balance. She had never fought anyone like him, and for the first time, she found herself questioning her own strength. Riker, still standing, met her eyes. He had fought for this moment, for humanity, for everything he believed in. And now, in the final test, he wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for respect. The Queen paused for a brief moment, her breathing heavy. Riker stood still, his sword raised, waiting. The crowd was silent. They knew that the battle between these two warriors would decide the fate of not only this challenge, but perhaps the future of their worlds. The battle between Riker and the Queen raged on, the two warriors locked in a deadly dance of strikes and counterattacks. The sound of their weapons clashing echoed throughout the arena, each blow carrying the weight of their struggle. Riker could feel the sweat dripping down his face, his muscles screaming from exhaustion, but he refused to slow down. The Queen, too, showed no signs of faltering. Her energy blade moved with precision, each strike aiming for a vital point. Riker's sword met the Queen's energy blade once more, sparks flying as they locked in place. He gritted his teeth, pushing against her strength, but he knew he was reaching his limits. He had been fighting for so long, each wave of soldiers, each clash, draining his energy little by little. His body ached, his mind was foggy, but the fire inside him still burned. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to give up now. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she sensed his fatigue. She could see it in his movements, the slight hesitation, the slower reaction times. She knew she was close. One final push, and this human warrior would fall before her. She raised her blade, preparing to strike, but something unexpected happened. Riker, with his last ounce of strength, dodged the Queen's attack. Instead of blocking or parrying, he shifted his weight and moved with a speed that surprised even him. His sword flashed as he ducked low, his body twisting and spinning. In that split second, the Queen's blade missed, and Riker took advantage of the opening. He swept his sword upward with all the force he could muster, striking the Queen's weapon with a powerful blow. The energy blade faltered for a moment, flickering as Riker's sword collided with it. Then, with a crack and a flash, the energy blade shattered, the pieces scattering into the air like sparks from a dying fire. The Queen stood frozen, staring in disbelief at the empty space where her weapon had been. For a brief moment, She felt exposed, vulnerable. She had never imagined that anyone, especially a human, could break through her defenses like that. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and the silence in the arena was deafening. Riker didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his sword raised, ready to finish what he had started. But instead of striking, he paused. The Queen's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no malice in her gaze, only a deep, silent understanding. The battle had ended, not because one of them had won, but because they had both reached their limits. The Queen slowly lowered her hands, surrendering to the truth she had been avoiding. You truly are different," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with respect. Riker stood tall, his sword still in hand, but no longer raised in attack. He lowered it slowly, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. "I came here to show you what humanity is capable of. Not just as warriors, but as survivors. We don't give up, no matter the odds." The Queen studied him for a long moment, her thoughts shifting. She had expected this battle to break him, to prove once and for all that humans were no match for her. Instead, she had seen something that made her question everything she had known. Riker had fought with honor, strength, and determination, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. Finally, the Queen spoke, her voice steady. "You have proven your point, human. Your warriors are not just legends. They are real, and they are stronger than I ever imagined." Riker nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "This isn't about just one warrior. It's about all of us, standing together. We fight because we believe in each other." The Queen lowered her head slightly, a sign of respect. "Then let us stand together," she said. "I will honor the alliance. The humans have earned their place in the galaxy." Riker felt a wave of relief wash over him. The battle was over, and humanity had won, not through brute force, but through perseverance and the courage to fight when it mattered most. The arena buzzed with an energy unlike anything the Queen had ever felt before. The battle was over, and the outcome had shaken her to the core. She had come into this challenge expecting to prove that no human could stand against her empire, but now she found herself looking at Riker, not as a mere opponent, but as an ally. The man who had faced her warriors, who had fought to the very edge of his limits, was not just a human. He was a symbol of something much greater. The Queen stood tall in the center of the arena, her mind racing. Her empire had ruled for centuries, undefeated, unchallenged. But today, something had changed. She had seen strength in Riker that no alien force had ever possessed, a strength born not just from physical power, but from the human spirit. His determination, his unwavering belief in his people, had shattered her old views. He was the proof that humanity could no longer be dismissed as fables. The crowd, once silent in awe, began to murmur, their voices rising in excitement. The Queen raised a hand, silencing them. She could feel the weight of their expectations, the weight of the decision that was about to be made. The humans had earned their place here, and she would make sure they knew it. She turned to Riker, who stood still, his sword lowered but still in hand. His breathing had slowed, but his eyes remained sharp, watching her carefully. He had fought for this moment, fought not only for himself but for humanity. Now the future of his people rested in the balance. "You have proven yourself, human," the Queen said, her voice strong and clear, yet tinged with respect. "Your warriors are no longer legends. They are real, and they are worthy of a place among the stars." Riker nodded, his face serious but filled with quiet pride. "Thank you. We're not asking for war or domination. We just want to stand side by side with the other civilizations, to show that humanity has its own strength." The Queen's gaze softened for a moment, and then she turned to the crowd. "Let it be known that today marks the beginning of a new era," she declared. "An era where humanity will no longer be seen as weak, but as equals among us all. Their courage, their resilience, has earned them a place in this galaxy. From this day forward, they will be our allies, our partners." The arena erupted in cheers, the sound echoing across the city. The Queen's declaration was more than just words. It was a promise. She had seen the strength of humanity, and she was ready to forge an alliance. The humans, once dismissed as a primitive race, now stood on equal footing with the most powerful species in the galaxy. Riker felt a wave of emotion wash over him. This was it, the moment they had fought for. The humans had earned their place, not through strength alone, but through the will to survive and the determination to fight for their future. He knew this alliance would change everything. It wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for every human who had ever believed in the strength of their people. As the crowd celebrated, Riker glanced up at the Queen. She met his eyes, and for the first time, there was no prideful ruler looking down from her throne. There was only a leader standing side by side with him, ready to face the future together. The battle was over, but a new journey was just beginning. The humans had proven that they were no longer just a story. They were a force to be reckoned with, and together, they would shape the future of the galaxy.